And just like that, we're live through the power of technology. How are you, Betsy? Welcome to the Conquering Everest podcast.
I'm good, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this because you have what I think is a very unique um, profession, I guess. It's the first time I've heard of a freedom guide. So why don't we take the first little bit here, and if you don't mind, introduce yourself to our listeners, our watchers, and yeah, let us learn a little bit about you.
Okay, let me start by saying that I know my story inside and out, and I know what I think's important and interesting. But if you are caught by something, please stop me. Okay, let me know if there's anything.
Will do.
Um, I started my life like any normal little middle class white chickie, and my family got a lot of chronic illness early. When I was 6, my brother was diagnosed with chronic illness, and when I was 8, my mom was. And so it was I became a little adult really early. And you know that nature versus nurture thing. In
Yeah.
my nature, I'm a perfectionist. And what happened was I became the good kid and the healthy one, and really sunk into that and got really perfect at doing that, and reading every room, and knowing what was going on below the surface of everything. But as the good one and perfect, I didn't talk about any of it. I just knew it. um, or I knew what to talk about and what I couldn't talk about. And the one thing that I kind of dove into in my early life was horseback riding. I didn't have a ton of money or anything like that. I started working for my riding when I was 9, I think. But I really, like, that was what I did. I got great grades. I followed every single rule that anybody could possibly give me, you know? I was really good. And I followed authority. And then um, let's see, I had Lyme disease when I was 12, and ever since then I've had
Mm.
pain, just joint pain, tested for rheumatoid arthritis and Lyme disease just about every year from then on. And but I just carried on, I did the stuff that was important to me, and did the stuff that I was told was important. And um I just, carried on being the perfect person that I possibly could. And did you ever have a quarter life crisis? Do you
E-
know
uh,
about what that is?
yeah, and so I can kind of relate to a lot of what you're saying with trying to be perfect, trying to be the good kid.
Yeah.
I grew up in a family that was pretty dysfunctional, and there was a lot of I'll say there was definitely some emotional trauma
Mhm.
and abuse. So for me, it was always trying to be the good kid so that I wouldn't get in trouble.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did. I'd say I had a small little probably crisis when I was around 25, and
Mhm.
then I hit the midlife at 40. So I've had two, but so yeah, I could relate to
Yeah.
that.
I feel like you've got the emotional abuse stuff. I have, like, from the age of 6, I had to be able to call 911 if I needed to. And it
Mm,
was, and give injections and stuff like that. And so, um, my parents did the very best job they could, and that doesn't mean I wasn't traumatized by all the
yeah,
stuff, like, that's how life goes. And I think that then we hit our mid-20s and we get out into the world and we aren't influenced by the same things, but that's how we grew up, that's how we adapted to life.
right.
Um, and we were taught how everything was supposed to go, and then when we get out there and we're not in the same tiny little ecosystem that our family is and our hometown is, it's different. It's different.
Right.
Than the rules are not the same, and so we often hit that quarter life crisis thing. When I did it, I started looking for what the perfect career was, because
Right.
that's what our society tells us, that we find um, happiness and purpose in our job, how we make money.
Right. Yeah.
And so
I
then
hear
I
you there.
started looking. Yeah, right? I started looking when I was like 24, never found it. I I ended up going out to Montana and going to school for photography, and real life got in the way again. And
Yeah.
I found a marriage, and my parents have been together forever, and so marriage is forever. And 3 years in, I told my therapist, "I don't know why I married this guy."
Mm.
And, um, but after doing a whole ton of jobs that were psychologically really not good for me. I mean, we're just talking retail, we're not talking horrible things. I was managing a store for a while. I started to get headaches,
Mm.
and then I got migraines, and then it got to the point where I had 30 to 31 migraines a month by 10 a.m. every single morning,
Mm.
and all those aches and pains that I've had forever. And I finally got, 25 years later, I got diagnosed with my own chronic disease.
Oh my. Yeah. Jeez.
But like with all of that, like I was doing everything, I was still doing everything exactly like you're supposed to do.
Right.
We're taught so hard, and then we adapt to the things that we have to, and we learn the very best way that we can how to do things.
Yeah.
And what I learned was to ignore myself, ignore my um certainly my psychological needs. Don't talk about stuff.
Yeah.
Um, Ignore what I need. I'll often ignore physical needs, push past all kinds of boundaries that my body is screaming at me. And I think, I mean, everybody's got their own thing, but I think that the reason that I got my chronic illness was because I just kept pushing and doing things that were bad for me.
Right. Even, and I imagine some of those, I mean, when you say bad for you, as far as, do you mean like it wasn't what you were truly passionate about? Or because I think, like having a job and a paycheck is good, but it could also be bad
Right.
for a person. Yeah.
Right. I wasn't doing things I was passionate about, although
Mhm.
I have a positive outlook. Like that's one of those nature things. Like
Yeah.
that's just in me. I can find the positive. So even, working in inventory at a drugstore, I could find the positive that, like I have a meticulous nature and I love to be able to find the little things and know where everything is in the store.
Right.
But being inside all day in the fluorescent lighting and pushing myself to do things that just weren't, you could say weren't, like didn't jive with my purpose, but really
Right.
like what I've found since then is I need to be outside, I need to be around animals and nature. um these are just the things that my body and mind need.
Yeah.
And everybody's got their things, but
Right.
um, I just denied all of it, and I didn't allow myself to feel even the little things. I prided myself in leaving work at work and leaving home at home and never talking about the other. And like that just means that I compartmentalized so bad that I didn't know what was going on. I never processed anything.
Yeah.
I never um it was bad. I got to the point where I was suicidal.
Hmm.
Um, and just the deep, deep misery.
Did you just feel empty inside? Is that what, when you got to that point where you felt, like, okay, I'd rather just be done with this life? Was it just an emptiness
Hmm.
inside of you, or what really brought on those feelings of suicide?
The words that I have now that I didn't have then,
Hmm.
um, it's really interesting how much I've learned since then. At that point, all I could tell you I was depressed and I didn't want to live anymore, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I would say now is I was trapped. I was trapped in the cage that I had made for myself.
Yeah.
Marriage is forever. It doesn't matter if I, married the wrong man. And um, I just had to keep climbing whatever ladder, like I started in retail. So I just continued to go up the ladder in retail, like just following what you're supposed to do to get more money so that I could get the right things
Yeah.
and be the right person. Um, all the makeup, all the blowing my hair out every single morning before work.
Right.
And it was, it was a cage. you
Yeah.
know?
I feel you. Well,
And it was
we're,
miserable.
we're all told, here in the United States, you got the American dream, right? You're supposed to have a nice
Hmm.
house, white picket fence, a couple of kids, maybe a dog. And then, yeah, you've got to fill your life with things
Hmm.
that just clutter and take up space. Because so I totally resonate with you on that point. It was all about, for me, especially in my 20s, it was all about find your career, make as much money as you can, and make sure your kids have everything they could possibly want, or pets or whatever, or your
Yeah.
spouse, you know. Yeah, so I totally relate with you on that one.
Yeah, and we got a lot of the same socialization, right? You and
Mhm.
I did.
Yeah.
Um, and we got a lot of different stuff, I women are supposed to be able to emote, right? Except
Hmm.
not really. And you probably can't at all, except maybe some anger here and there.
Yeah, I'm supposed to be, men are supposed to be stoic and strong, and women, you're supposed to be open and emotional, but not too much,
Right.
right?
If we are, then we're
Yeah.
like fluff
In the
and
in the 1950s, if you would have been, they would have locked you up, and they would have
right,
sent you away to, you know,
right,
yeah.
right. It's there is no winning.
Hmm.
There's no winning in our society, and I it, I can't even imagine if I wasn't, a white chick,
Hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
I cannot imagine how hard it would be to be in the cage that anybody else is. Like I wouldn't want to be in your cage.
Right.
I wouldn't want to
Yeah.
be in anybody else's.
Yeah.
I
I
don't like
hear
mine.
you. Yeah. So you started to get into trusting nature, and
Hmm.
let's I don't want to shortchange your depression. So you fell into depression. You began to have suicidal ideations.
Hmm.
How did you change your life at that point, or did you still try to maintain?
Oh, I maintained as hard as I could.
Mm,
Um, Interestingly, that was right around the time that I went off all of my meds.
mm,
Um, and it wasn't related. Like I was just going to be there anyway.
right.
But I was on several different medications for my disease and birth control and like all the things.
Yeah.
And I had kind of two things happen at once. And at this point in my life, I don't really know which happened first, but I read a self-help book. I mean, God, I was just desperate. So I was
Yeah.
reading and looking at anything, mostly about careers, but this one jumped out at me and I read it, and she could have been speaking directly to me, and it planted a seed. There was also a stage performance, just a musical that I saw that really spoke to me. And both of these things didn't change my life immediately, but they planted a seed that there was something else.
Mm,
There was something more that I could work towards. And so I did slowly.
yeah.
Slowly. Um, I first I had to stop working completely because of my body. I was so sick and miserable. But then at least I think a year and a half after that, um, I started with my body.
Mm,
I knew I had to start somewhere. I started with my body and I cleaned up my body, starting with, I did a ton of research. Everybody's got their own thing that works for them. I did a
right.
ton of research on our microbiome and how your gut works and everything like that. And so I
Mm,
went on this nutritional protocol diet thing and healed up my gut. And it did wonders for my physical body. And then I started very slowly changing some other stuff. I I was able to get a horse for the first time in my life, but I was just following the joy, like these tiny
Yeah.
things. I couldn't remember the last time I was happy except when I was riding horses. And so I made a way for that to be the thing so that there was some joy in my life. And then I healed my body and I started to work again, and I started working with horses outside, and I hadn't worked with horses for over a decade.
Right.
And so I started it was never there was never a plan. There was like the next tiny little thing that I could do to be a little bit less miserable.
Yeah.
And so my body got healed and I started to feel empowered because I was working again and I was doing something that I enjoyed. And the opportunity arose, and I was able to get a divorce. And, that took tons of planning, and I had spent all my life planning, right? Like all
Yeah.
my life making things work exactly right. And so the divorce went fine. I was lucky enough to not have, I wasn't in any danger
Yeah.
physically or even emotionally. And so after I got a divorce, um, that's when I really started to work on my mental and emotional health. Um, I've certainly had therapists along the way, and um, but since my divorce, I haven't. I've worked stuff out from myself. I've found inspiration and kind of help from a lot of different areas, and different people. I think I definitely feel that teachers are everywhere.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so it's been tiny step by tiny step. And then all of a sudden, like these tiny steps start to cascade.
Right.
And so the last 2 years, especially, but like the last 5 years have been crazy amounts of change in my life. And I'm starting to kind of steer my own ship. I'm walking my own path for the first time ever. And it's interesting, what I'm finding now is that because I spent my entire life doing things exactly the way I was supposed to, my creativity is gone. I don't know how to think outside the box
Uh,
and like develop my own thing. So actually this freedom guide is unique as far as I know. I've never heard of
yeah.
anybody doing it. This is what I
Mhm.
do. I went through a mentorship for life coaching, and that um I'm good at that. And that doesn't resonate exactly like I want it to be. I want to free other people
Right.
who have found themselves in a cage.
Would you say, um, as you started to take these little steps,
Mhm.
and I call them, uh, well, I think when you start hearing, listen to yourself, and you start taking those positive steps in the direction you want to go, I call them God's whispers, right? He's like in your ear saying, "Hey, you should go ahead and take that
Mhm.
trip you want to take." Where would you say, like, the expectations of life, money in the United States? I'll say in the United States,
Mm.
money is a big deal. Where does money fall on your scale? Um, it sounds like at one point it was, yeah, you worked, you had
Mhm.
to earn more. But being a coach, I've done
Mhm.
some coaching and mentoring, and I haven't made anything from it. I at this point, I mean, I've done it for folks, and it's just been of my own goodwill. So when you say you're freedom guide, or you're into coaching, you're probably, uh, at least in the beginning, you're not going to be making what you were making in the retail space. Or so, like, it sounds. Where would you say those expectations of life, the relationship, the house, the money? Where does that fall on your radar now? Is it pretty low down? Like, you don't.
The it's actually funny. 2 years ago, I reconnected with my brother's best friend from when he was young, and um, I had found myself enough to. It's funny. I put myself out there on a couple dating sites and was just so frustrated. Just so frustrated. And finally, I just like wrote this list of like, this is who I am, like bald faced, like just
Yeah.
this. And I still didn't get any. thing from the dating sites because obviously, but I happen to like, I mean, when you're ready, it happens,
Yeah.
and that's so trite, and yet I couldn't have asked for a better partner. And he's got a little house, which is so different from anything that I would ever have picked.
Right.
Um, and house doesn't matter to me. Like, location matters to me a lot. I need to be close enough to nature,
Right.
but the things don't
Yeah.
matter as much. And that doesn't mean I don't have anything. I certainly get stuff. I've got a nice phone, and like, I put nice things around me, but it's not for show. It's for stuff that I'm interested in.
It doesn't
And
control your choices, or it doesn't control your decisions.
right,
Yeah.
right. When I started working again after being so sick that I couldn't work, I have not worked full time since then.
Mm.
And I've worked in animals. I make about 2/3 now. I make about 2/3 of what I did when I left managing.
Yeah.
Maybe, God, sometimes half of what I did. And I hope to be able to support myself with my guide, my coaching, my freedom guide business at some point, only so that I can do what I'm really passionate about.
Right.
I like what I do, for my day job right now. It's fine, but
Yeah.
it's not my passion, and I want to do my passion. And so the only thing that I hope for money from my personal business is to be able to make ends meet.
Yeah.
And the ends that I need now are so much smaller than I ever thought.
Yeah. Well, so, being a freedom guy, that's, that freedom, so many of us are searching for that freedom in our lives, because I would guarantee 9 out of 10 of people that we would talk to, they've got a job because they feel like they need to be,
Mm-hmm.
they got the job that pays the best for the skill set they had, and
Right.
they're probably just doing it because they want to pay the bills, they want to be a provider. But that freedom that we lose by living, taking the expectations and saying, okay, this is what I have to do.
Mm-hmm.
um Once you so, like, the free when I think of you, and I think of the freedom guide, you're finding the freedom in your own life to where you can express who you truly are, and you can be around the things you want to be. um and so many of us, even myself at this point, I mean, I have a good job, and a day job, and
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy what I do, but it's not, like you said, it's not the passion. And there's been so many times where I've said, if I just quit, I could find a little bit more freedom to pursue what I really want to do. But that's a scary thing.
It's terrifying. It's
Yeah.
absolutely terrifying. And um, I'm not in a position to just jump away from working and
Right.
jump into this. Yeah, no. And the first part of the freedom is figuring out what of the expectations, like when you say I should make enough money for my entire family to live. Well, okay, yes. They
Mhm.
need to eat. They need a roof over their heads. They need, like, you go back to, what are you paying for that's for appearances that doesn't matter to you at all?
Right.
And but we're socialized for it to really matter to us, right?
Yep.
And so it's really digging deep, and it's a process. This has been 12 years coming for me,
Yeah.
and I will never be truly there. It's always a process, because it's one, you I get to one thing, and then, last weekend something hit me, and
Right.
it's another thing of, like, working through some more stuff. But it's a step ahead. I no longer feel like I'm taking 2 steps forward and falling back 3 steps,
Yeah. And
because
that's
that's how it started. Like, I would
right.
do something, and then it would backfire, or um, somebody would say something and I would just crumble.
Yeah.
I really feel like I'm mostly making forward momentum, forward motion now at this point.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what you do. I'm gonna pull over my notes. So if I
Mm-hmm.
look like I'm looking away from you, I am, but it's for a good reason because I try to grab my notes here. Let's talk a little bit about what you're doing today and what you're hoping. So um, Freedom Guide, my notes specializing in renaturing, finding and trusting your true nature. Let's talk about that a little bit because I think that's so important that we all get so caught up when we're young because our brainwashing, and that's what I
Mm-hmm.
call it,
Mm-hmm.
for good or bad. It starts when you're a child, right? And then you get into your teen years, and then it's still there, but the expectations change a little bit. So we're all really kind of brainwashed. Um, I think about I was just thinking about this morning. I went and got some breakfast and I got a drink, and I got the big drink because it's $1, right? So you get that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm thinking, man, when I was younger, when I was a kid or a teenager, you just get a little drink and that was enough to satisfy your appetite. But now I got to get this big one that I probably won't even finish, and I'm just
Mm-hmm.
wasting. So it's the programming is still there. So let's talk about those steps to finding our true nature. Like what does that mean?
It's actually part of it is really truly finally listening to your body,
Hmm.
because there's a lot of our emotions and our mental reactions that we can feel.
Yeah.
But I don't know about you, but I stopped listening to my body,
Hmm.
and including like, yes, my joints hurt all the time. I wonder why my joints actually hurt. Like
Yeah.
now thinking about it, I wonder why I was hurting. Like what kind of pressure, like literally pressure, was I putting on myself that my knees hurt all the time?
Right.
And that sounds woo woo. Like it sounds totally crazy. But then you can also think about that we really do honestly have a gut brain
Hmm.
um, that is feeds into our actual head brain.
Right.
There's a bundle of nerves in our guts that make all kinds of decisions. Now they're primitive, but
Hmm.
um, we have shut down on our body. We've been programmed, right? Our programming is to not pay attention to our body and to stay in our heads all the time. So one of the first steps in finding our true nature is to get out of our heads. Now there's tons and tons of ways to do that. We can do it
Right.
cerebrally, like literally just saying, okay, so you're thinking about something. Which way do you lean?
Yeah.
Literally, like, okay, if you think a bad thought, think I'm trapped, I'm trapped, I'm trapped, I'm trapped. Which way do you lean? I tend to lean a little bit backwards. Okay, I think, oh, I'm so peaceful. I'm so peaceful. I'm literally leaning forward a little bit.
Yeah.
And so that's all in your head. Meditation is wonderful, great, right? Whatever.
Hmm.
Exercise is super important because you're literally learning to feel what your body is doing.
Yeah.
Um, so that's really the first step. And then after that, it's also figuring out what you can shed.
Mm.
Like it's just layers and layers, like an onion. What you're getting to is the very core of yourself. You call. I'm sorry. You said God's whispers.
Yeah, I call them God's whispers, when you have
Mm-hmm.
that just moment of enlightenment
Yeah.
of something that seems so simple that you're like, why
Right.
didn't I get this before?
Right. And so there's a lot of, everybody calls it something different. I call it your
Yeah.
true nature. You would
Mm.
call it God's whispers. Somebody else calls it their essential self or their true self or um, the divine within,
Mm.
really. It's, to me, nature and the outdoors is just so important. And so for me, it's our human nature, our animal nature, our inner nature, our true nature. It's all the same thing to me, or
Mm.
pieces of the same thing.
A little bit ago you were talking about your gut, and
Mhm.
were you talking about your literal gut, or are you talking about that like instinctual internal?
That's
Um,
funny. My literal gut. There's an actual bundle of nerves in your gut. So when we talk about our gut instinct, there
yeah.
is a gut instinct. It's
Okay.
science. It's
Wow.
amazing. And our culture um, deifies the brain,
Yeah. Well, it's
and
just
so we don't even consider it.
I was thinking of it because we were talking about things that we know, like getting healthy and different things that should be
Mhm.
incorporated in finding your true self. And I'm an emotional eater, right? When I'm happy, I want to
Mhm.
eat. When I'm sad, I want to eat. And when you mentioned gut, I'm like, yeah, what is that? So my brain wants to eat because of that dopamine rush,
Mhm.
and the gut is like being I'm kind of seeing my gut as being that bad influence friend that always has the bright idea, like, yeah, let's eat a ton, and then you feel miserable. I was just trying to make that correlation between the gut and the mind and how they might work together.
That's funny. I would ask you if you think it's actually your gut that's the demon on your shoulder.
Probably not. It's probably more
Because I'll
psycho.
bet your gut would tell you when you've had enough and
Yeah,
you don't listen to it.
you ignore
I
it.
don't listen to it. I'm not very good about it. If
Yeah,
there's still stuff on my plate, I eat it.
yeah. Hmm. Yeah, well, I hear you there. Yeah. And it's
So
funny because you know what you're supposed to do, but
yeah.
a lot of us don't do it.
Right. And I think that's the thing though. It's not what you're supposed to do because we're gonna fight everything that we're supposed to do that we can.
Yeah,
And if that means continuing to eat after what you know so okay, so you got a great job and you
yeah,
worked yourself to death because that's what you're supposed to do.
right.
Apparently your training on that was better than your training on don't eat too much at each sitting,
Yeah,
because that's another thing that you're supposed to do.
right. You're supposed to. Yeah, yeah.
But there's a point at which when you start to really trust yourself and be able to feel yourself and know yourself and what's good for you on a mind body soul level,
Hmm.
you don't stop eating because you're supposed to not eat that much. You don't eat a salad because you're supposed to eat a salad. You do it because that's what sounds really good to you,
Hmm.
and you're full and you don't want to eat anymore. Like it ends up when you stop doing things because y- you're working really hard and you're supposed to work really hard and it's horrible to work this hard, so I'm going to eat a donut.
Hmm.
When you're not working that hard and you're not that stressed because what you're doing is important to you. If you could podcast all day, I would bet you wouldn't just eat your way through the day
No,
because
yeah,
it's exciting and it's something that's really interesting to you. And listening to people's stories is fascinating to you because
yeah.
you've been there and you don't. I asking you now, you probably don't feel like eating this moment.
No, no, I'm
You're
fine.
you're caught up in what you're doing, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I can I can only talk about that because I love to eat. I
right.
just love to eat. But
And I think because in your bio it talks about uh, trappings of modern society,
mhm,
and I really think that and I hate to just keep picking on eating because this could go so many different directions, but
oh, for sure, but we may as well stick with one thing.
yeah, and you're kind of trained as you're growing up, right? I mean, I was given free range to the kitchen, and I grew up in a hostile, what I say is a hostile environment.
Mhm,
And so when I was sad, then I could always find comfort in
mhm,
that food. And it's almost as if my environment was telling me that's what you need to do. But then you get older and you start caring about how you look. So you say, well, I want to lose weight.
mhm,
And then society tells you, well, you need to eat like a rabbit, or you need to do keto, or you need to do one of these
mhm,
things. And I really feel like, there's a, like you're saying, there's a good balance in there. If you're doing something you love to do, you're not going to be your food is going to be your fuel, not your
mhm.
comfort. And I don't know, it's just I'm kind of trying to process all this, and it just it's like a bunch of little light bulbs going off in my
Yeah,
head.
it's huge. It's not
Yeah,
one thing. Like, none of this is one thing. It's
right.
we're all so interconnected.
Yeah. When you talk about nature a little bit, for you, I mean, so I've heard throughout my life, like reconnecting with nature is very, it feeds the soul. And I know some people talk about get outside, get barefoot, play in the rain, different things like that. When you talk about connecting with nature, what advice would you have for somebody? Let's say all they've done is their whole life that they've worked to earn,
Mhm.
they've raised their kids, they've stayed in maybe an unhealthy marriage because they're supposed to, and now they're
Mhm.
like, okay, and that was kind of my midlife. At 40, I woke up one day and I said, I'm depressed. I know I'm depressed. I've got this nice house, right? I just got this big house that I bought. I got the job that I could retire from, and I have the pension. I've got 2 kids, and they're athletic, and everything on the surface is supposed to be perfect, but I'm miserable, you know. Um, and so I had that kind of midlife crisis to where I'm like, I've got to figure things out, and that did turn into my marriage dissolving, and then I got into writing and speaking, and now podcasting, and I've slowly but surely started to find my way. But I'm not and I'm a nature guy, but I've never really got out in nature. I mean, I've camped,
Mhm.
but I haven't connected. So let's talk a little bit about that
I
with
love
nature.
how you said that. It's super important. You've camped, but you've never really connected.
Right.
So I don't camp very much. I don't usually go to, like, all of the local parks or the state parks. I just find nature wherever I can. I'd
Mhm.
prefer to be out of view of other humans and cars and houses and stuff like that.
Right.
Um, but I can sit in my backyard with my dogs and just feel the sun. So let's say, on the vernal equinox, actually, the very first day of spring, I went out for a walk and I fell on the ice and I hurt my back, and I
Oh,
was stuck on my back for 2 weeks, and nature's super important to me, right? So I could not wait to get back outside, and it took 2.5 weeks before I could take the walk out to where I can be away from humans, at least visually.
yeah.
And um, so I got out there and I sat down at this pond that I like. And I sat there and I enjoyed all of the beauty, and I felt completely separate from it.
Mm,
I felt, and I was grief struck. Like, it was horrible for me, who that connection to nature is the really big thing for me. And
mhm.
the fact that I was sitting in nature and I felt completely disconnected and apart from it. So
Yeah.
I sat there, and the very first thing I did was close my eyes and listened, because I one of the things I've done is I'm a birder, which means I go out and I identify birds. But I also do it by ear. So I listen to their calls, and there's lots of, like, apps and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
I started with CDs. And so I started to identify the sounds of the wind through the pines and the various birds that I could identify. And I was out there. I had been sitting for a while realizing that I couldn't connect, so I was listening to the little critters under the leaves. And then I started to just feel the sun and the wind against me, and I can do that in my backyard,
Mhm.
where I am completely surrounded by everything. Like, I cannot look a direction and not see people,
Yeah.
or traffic hurtling past. So just the sensual feelings of nature,
Yeah.
the feel of the sun, the feel of the air on me. And I'm not, like, stripped down to nothing or anything. We're
Right.
I'm just feeling it, and I'm listening. I'm using my senses. I'm smelling the it rained yesterday and it's a little bit moist smelling, and the leaves, because of the winter, are rotting, and so I can
Mhm.
feel that, or I can smell that, and it doesn't smell bad to me. Like, it's not, it's
Yeah.
like a clean rotting smell of leaves, and I start to realize that I'm part of it. I focus on my breath. Like, this becomes more like meditation, but I like focus on my breath. Okay. Hey, look, I'm breathing just like that chipmunk. Like, hey, look, I'm an animal too.
Yeah.
And then I can open my eyes and I can start to take it in and see, oh yeah, really I am part of this.
It's interesting because as a child, I
Mhm.
mean, most kids, at least kids I grew up with and myself, love to be outside, ride our
Mhm.
bikes, play in the field, play football, whatever. And, take our shoes off. We didn't care. We, jump in mud puddles. We did all that. And as an adult, we did that as a child, like without thinking. Like
Yeah,
it was just our nature to do that. But as an adult, we
exactly.
have to
No,
get very intentional.
exactly. It's
And it's like,
nature.
man, we lost. How did we lose that? How do we lose that? Like you said, I remember a kid going out in the backyard. We lived in an apartment. We had this big drainage ditch or something,
Mhm.
and that thing might as well have been the world's greatest toy because I'd go outside and I'd play in that ditch and try to catch frogs and all that other stuff. And I just never thought about it. And now I think about it, and it's like, well, maybe I should get away and do some fishing this weekend. Maybe that'll help me. And it's like I got to be intentional. It's like what happens to us that we just can't be there without, it's like it's almost like a chore for us to go outside or do
You said it
something.
earlier, we're programmed out of it. We're
Yeah,
brainwashed.
brainwashed into thinking that there's more important things than
Yeah.
the world around
And
us. Wow.
if that means you have to start prioritizing it and putting it on your to-do list, it's gotten to the point for me where it's kind of the top of my to-do list. And yeah,
Yeah.
sure, I have to put it on there, make sure it happens, but I have to,
Hmm.
because of how much better I feel when I remember that I am not separate
Right.
from nature.
Does it make you too? Let me ask you this. So when you're able to go out and you really connect with nature,
Mhm.
and you have your time with it without inhibition, does that make the fact that you got to go to work or you have a job? I mean, how much easier does that make life as we've come to know as an adult? How much easier does it make your day? Does it help you find a new appreciation, or is it just when you're in nature, you're in nature, and then when you're back inside, you're back inside? You know what I'm saying? I don't.
I do see what you're saying. And we have to go back to the thing where it's a part of it.
Yeah.
Um, Prioritizing the fact that I need to be in nature starts me down the road of prioritizing myself and my
Mm,
needs. And then that starts me down the road of prioritizing the fact that maybe, despite the fact that I'm making more money in this job,
yeah.
it's not it's not good for me. And I could change jobs and make less money, but feel more me, so that I'm not feeling like I'm connected to nature and I'm
Mm,
the so that I'm not feeling like two different people. My
mm,
goal is to feel like the same person all the time and be at peace with that,
yeah.
and joyful. And not we're not just talking like, I sometimes I think that our concept of peace is sitting quietly, like
Hmm.
playing solitaire on our phone, right? Like,
Right.
we're not talking peace like just quiet. We're talking like joyful, like
Yeah.
nothing is eating away at us.
Yeah.
And so the prioritizing nature, prioritizing the connection to nature, is prioritizing a connection to me,
Mm,
because I have nature, I am nature. So it's prioritizing my own self.
Yeah.
And it's a slippery slope from there to doing exactly what you want with your life.
And it really, and this conversation really is resonating because my belief, and this stemmed from a vision that I had one day, where I feel like the world, however infinitely big it is,
Mm-hmm.
solar systems, planets, all that. If you put all that and you captured it all in a bubble, it's like this perfect harmony of energy and vibration, right? In a perfect world. So
Mm-hmm.
you just nature as it was created, it's this perfect harmony. But then here we come, these humans here on
Mm.
Earth, and whoever knows whatever else is out there, and we start to complicate that perfect harmonious vibration. We get it out of balance, and then that causes what we perceive as chaos in our mind. So that's kind of on a very short definition of kind of how I feel life is.
Yeah.
And 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 it keeps taking me back because we were talking about childhood, and we go out and we play and we do all these things, and we're really connected, and we don't worry about where our next meal is going to come from because we just trust it's there. And we don't worry about, if we scrape our knee, somebody's going to fix it. Like we don't have these worries in is the loss of trust in ourselves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what all these different thoughts that are going through my mind. It's like, yeah, how in a perfect world, I would, if I could bring back little Brian, that kid that would go outside barefoot. Um, I it was funny as I got in trouble for it, but as a kid, uh, I remember this playing with like those big styrofoam like jets or planes you throw and
Yeah.
they play
Yeah.
around. And I was probably 7 years old, and I still remember this, and I think I remember it because the neighbor threw a fit. But I had to go to the bathroom. I had to pee, so I just right there in the field, and I just went. And the neighbor didn't like this so much, and they came over, and I denied it and all that. But I'm like, I was so comfortable in my world that
Yep.
I just felt like I used the bathroom in the field, and nobody cared. And then and I just trusted everything was going to be okay. Why? But today, in today's world, if it was perfect, I would probably quit my 9 to 5 job. Not because I dislike it. I do like the work I do, and I do like the people I work with, but it's not what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if I really trusted myself, I'd say, you know what, that's okay. I can quit this job because I trust that I'll make money doing the things I want to do to pay my bills. Why do we have such a hard time as adults trusting ourselves, trusting the decisions we feel we want to make? And I know there's a programming aspect to it, but we wake up every day and we know what we want. I mean, I truly feel deep down inside, if you connect internally to yourself, you know whether or not you want to go to that job. Whether or not you want to date somebody specific or whatever. What happened? I mean, why can't we trust ourselves as adults?
I have a two-parted answer. The first is I'm not sure that I believe that we all wake up in the morning and know what we want.
Okay.
I spent a lot of my life not knowing.
Not,
I only did what I thought that I should do,
okay.
and that turned into what I wanted to do. And
All
I
right.
really it's been a long process to I never called in sick.
Yeah.
I never called it I never woke up in the morning and said, "Oh, I don't want to go to work." That's much more recent to me. I
Yeah.
hated my job. I hated my entire life, and I never woke up in the morning and said, "Oh, I don't want to go to work."
Huh. Wow.
So I will challenge you on that. Okay, so trusting myself. When I got out of my marriage, I had lost all trust in myself and everybody else. Because how could I have gotten into that? How could I have continued it?
Mhm.
He lied. So, like, and I continued to believe him. Like, how could I trust myself to know that somebody was telling the truth? And my dad helped me out with a bunch of stuff, and he trusted me. And I, like, screwed him over so bad, so many times. How could
Mm.
he still trust me? And it was a long process to come back to realizing that I was doing the very best that I could with the information that I had and the
Right.
adaptations that I had made all the way from childhood. And so it was first giving myself the compassion and the grace there, not necessarily that I had made the best decisions, because yes, I look back and I go, what the hell was I thinking? But I was following exactly what I felt like I needed to do. And
Mm.
so it's learning differently there. Now, I have another metaphor if you have a moment.
Yeah, oh yeah, we got time.
I was thinking the other day about bushwhacking.
Mhm.
You know what you do as a kid? You just go anywhere.
Yeah, you just explore and
And that's what you were talking about just trusting that your next meal will come and that, when you have to go to the bathroom, you'll go to the bathroom, as opposed to now where we'll wait for 6 hours to go pee.
yeah,
Like,
right.
um, I was thinking about that. There's one place in my adult life where I have felt okay about actually bushwhacking, going off trail.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, what's the formula? Like, there's got to be an actual formula. There's got to be a reason that I felt okay there. And I was thinking about it, and I was comfortable in the place that I was, physical place, the house and the land. I was comfortable. I knew where the boundaries were,
Mhm.
because that's actually helpful. Boundaries are super helpful. If we're talking about like going out on 100 acres, like the state park, whatever, right? And we're just going to bushwhack in the state park, like, where is home? Like, where is
Right.
coming back? So we need the boundaries. So I feel comfortable with the place and the boundaries. I know the general lay of the land. Like, this is up and this is down, like on a physical level. I've never, like, except for Girl Scouts, like a gazillion years ago, or Boy Scouts. I was an Explorer Scout too. So at some point I did a merit badge and used a compass, but I don't remember any of that. So we're not talking north and south. We're just talking like general lay of the land. We're talking there's stone walls, because I live in New England. There's stone walls everywhere. So I know where the stone walls are. I know where the little streams, the rivulets are, right? So if
Mhm.
there's water, I'm like, okay, well, it's got to be down the hill from that, and I like there's the great big trees. Like there's a birch that I absolutely adore, and there's a couple pine trees that you can see from forever away. And I felt comfortable enough. I knew enough landmarks, and I knew the general lay of the land, and I knew where the edges were, that I felt comfortable to go off off trail, like off the
Mhm.
path, and create my own. And I made a whole bunch of paths. So I was like, okay, right? What do we need? We need boundaries. We need to
Mhm.
be comfortable within ourselves and to know what our edges are. We can't I know that I can't go into a crowd of people for too long. I'm an introvert. I love people. But get me into a crowd and it makes me anxious and I go a little
Yeah.
overboard, right? And I know that, like I'm beginning to trust in my body to know when I have to pee. Like,
Mhm.
I know I'm beginning to trust to know my parameters, to know the lay of the land a little bit within myself, and to know, okay, this is ridiculous, but like I know my budget. I know what I spend money on. So I know exactly how much money I have to make. And I know that right now I have to work 35 hours to do that. But in another 6 months, I'll have paid something off. So I can make $200 less than that a month. And if that means I can drop some hours to spend more time outside because it's
Mm.
good for me. Like I can start to like walk outside the lines. Um, and it's still easier if you follow somebody else's path, like even if one
Yeah.
person has tread it, right? Like
Yeah.
you look at something like life coaching, which is it's not mainstream, right?
Right.
But there's enough people that have done it. so you can start to do something else. Now, you were talking about trust, and I'm actually really feeling trusting that at some point I will be doing this full time. The Freedom Guide will be my full-time thing. I don't know how successful I'll be, but I know that I'll be able to support myself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when that's going to be. I have no idea, but there's just like a knowing.
But you trust that it's on its way.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
I have an inner knowing that I am good at this and that there are people that this will resonate with
Yeah.
and that I'll be able to help them.
And that's kind of connecting back to that childlike trust where
Right.
we don't know if it's right around the corner, but we know if
Right.
we walk far enough, we're gonna get
Right.
there.
And we'll be fed
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
we'll be safe. Somebody will call us back. Mom will call us and we'll at least know which direction to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So we have the landmarks. We've lost them.
Yeah.
We need to remember.
So somebody's going to listen to this, somebody's going to watch it, and let's assume that at least one person says, you know what, I completely resonate with this. I'm not happy in my life. I know I need to make changes. Where do they start?
There are a gazillion people out there that are willing to help. I mean, you can start with therapy if your insurance covers it, right?
Right.
If exactly what I'm saying, the metaphors that I use and the words that I use and the fact that I talk too fast sometimes and I have a very dirty mind and I use bad language all the time. If I personally am super exciting to you, then I have a website, betsykudlinski.com, and you can contact me and you can schedule working with me. But there's a gazillion ways to start on your next step.
Get
It is
somebody
step
in your
by
corner.
step. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be one person forever.
Right.
In fact, it probably shouldn't be. If you start to depend on one person to be your guru forever, you're going to outgrow and you're going to stop trusting yourself, or you're never going to learn how to trust yourself. You have to balance working with other people with trusting your own readiness to move on by yourself or to your next teacher.
And you didn't say this outright, but it struck me in a way that self-forgiveness, forgiving yourself. You've got to forgive yourself for the life that you've quote unquote created. If you're unhappy, what I hear from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that one of those first steps too, but get somebody in your corner. But then you've got to start working on. For me, at 40, I had to learn to love myself because I did not love myself.
It's true. It's true. And if you spend all of your time berating yourself for the choices you made up to this point, you are never going to get there.
Yeah.
It's really, like you said, self-forgiveness. It's compassion. It's I would never treat somebody else the way I've treated myself.
Right.
Like even somebody that I disliked, I would never treat them as harshly as I treat myself and expect the same amount out of them. When I finally internalized to treat myself like I treat others, it's amazing.
I think if I would have said, half the things I said to myself to somebody else, they would have socked me right in the nose because, I know I've been, I something I finally came to grips with very, late in life, but not too late, thankfully, but is that, learning to forgive and love myself and I'm still working on the trust. That's why this conversation's been really good for me because it just got my mind moving a mile a minute, which I enjoy because it means something's resonating out there. But
I would love to dig into that.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I've always done, the reason that I like to do what I do is I like to listen to people. I'm far more interested in other people than I am in myself. And so I'm so interested in hearing from you what it is that you don't trust about yourself. That doesn't mean that we have to talk about it right now.
Yeah. Well, it sounds, I was getting ready to say, it sounds like we've got to have a part 2 to this conversation. Because I'd like to share and get your perspective on that, because it's really piquing a childlike curiosity in my mind, and it feels good. We're actually at an hour now, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of my I love and I hate these kind of conversations, because I love these conversations that time goes by so fast. But
Mm-hmm.
it's like, darn it, time is going by so fast. And that's why it's like, oh, why couldn't it be longer? So I think we need to schedule a part two. I would like
We
to
can
have another.
absolutely do that, and
All right.
trusting yourself and trusting your true nature.
All right. So anybody listening to this or watching this, stay tuned. We're gonna put together a part two. But as we get ready close, so you've got your website. Is there social media or anything that you want to throw out there? Anybody can they find you on Instagram or Facebook or?
I I I stick close to home. I have a
Okay.
Facebook page. It's not even a business Facebook page.
Okay.
I do have a Facebook group. It's a private Facebook group specifically for anybody that's interested in my work and working their own stuff out. And it's perfectly free. Um, and you can get to it through my website. I would
Website.
rather, it's easier to do that because, I want to make sure that people answer the questions and understand that this is private. You can't talk about it elsewhere,
Yeah.
and to respect each other. And I want people to be able to answer that instead of giving a direct link to that group.
Yeah, and that or that website link should be in the description of this live cast, and it'll also be for anybody that's listening to a podcast. If you take a look at the description below, you're going to find that link. All right, so we need to schedule a part two, because I definitely want to follow up on this conversation more. But as we close out for today,
Mm-hmm.
last question I always ask. There's only two questions I ever script, and that's the first one when I ask you to introduce yourself, and it's the last one when I ask you to share a parting word of wisdom for that one person that needs to hear you right now. No pressure.
It's okay. It's going to take a long time, and you can start where you are.
Start. I love that. Start where you are. I can't tell you. Yeah. That means a lot to me. Maybe I was the one I need to hear it, but even though I know that, I practice that, but it gives me goosebumps every time I hear it, because that's so true.
It
And
doesn't
that's,
matter how many people we help, we always need to help ourselves as
yeah.
well.
And it goes into that trust. If you trust yourself, you'll just take that first step. So,
Yeah.
well, hang tight. I want to talk to you a little bit more off air, but thank you for coming on the show. And anybody, like I said, listening, watching, stay tuned. We're going to have to get the part two to this. So stay tuned.